Good day, everyone, and welcome to this lecture. We will discuss escalation, and we're going to focus the calculation on exercise 1 in your module. Prepare escalation certificate number 5, dated the 28th of June 2018. So that is important, the date of 28th of June. So that will be the date of the certificate, and that will be, as we've discussed before, reflects the IE indices. We've got two different tender dates for the main contract. That was submitted on the 14th of November, and that reflects the IO, the base month. So for the main contract, we'll use indices November 2017, and then we have a different tender date for the electrical installation on the 2nd of December. So the IO, the base month for electrical installation, is December 2017. Now remember, in your main contract, we do have provisional sums for the electrical installation, but the tender was submitted the following month. So we've got two different IOs for the main contract, November 2017, and for the electrical installation, December 2017. We are preparing now the escalation based on certificate number 5. We did certificate 4 before. So the question is now, what is the escalation based on the values of certificate 5? And in this case, all the values are given. We will be in a position at a later stage when we do payment certificates to determine how did we get to the actual values for the various trades. So you'll see in this case that we've got various trades. Preliminaries, bill number 1, it's numbered 190 per the work group indices, and you'll see that is now the last indice that is provided, although in the bill of quantities we will start off with preliminaries as bill number 1. Then the bill number 2 is earthworks, and the work group for number for earthworks is 104, and you'll find the numbers on the indices. Not necessarily that you should study that and know the work group numbers. Obviously, the more you work with it, you'll come familiar with the work group numbers. Then we have a range of trades, plumbing and drainage. We talk about plumbing and drainage, but you'll note in the work group, drainage is first as work group 146, and then plumbing 148. And then electrical installation, work group 160. And remember, we've said before, as a quantity surveyor, you will then request the electrical engineer to provide you with the value of work done on the project at that specific point in time. So the value for electrical and for all other nominated subcontractors work, you'll have to contact the specific engineer to give you the value for that specific nominated subcontract. And then we have profit and attendance, and in this case there was amounts allowed for profit and attendance. And remember, we've said profit and attendance and day works is non-adjustable. In other words, there's no escalation attached to profit and attendance in this case. So there's no work group for profit and attendance, so therefore no escalation. We also discussed in our previous lecture that the escalation is based on work done. In other words, these values that we've got here is for all work done. In other words, you've gone on site with the contractor and you determined the value for brickwork to be 100,000 Rand. These methods and means how to get to that, it's up to you to decide which is the method that you're going to apply. So it's work done plus then materials on site. There's escalation on materials on site as well. So if we look at brickwork, for instance, work group 116, we do have a value for work done of 100,000 Rand. So we have to add the materials on site. So the value for work group 116 that is subject to escalation is going to be the value of work done plus then the materials on site, the 15,000 plus the 7,000 Rand. You should also ask, in this case, we've got sand and cement. Now, it could be that the 7,000 Rand could be also divided amongst brickwork. It could be also sand and cement for plastering, or it could also be for concrete. So you have to ask the contractor to give you that split amongst the various trades. So in this case, the contractor said, well, let's keep the sand and cement. All of that on site goes to brickwork. We've got masonry, ironmongery, work group 132, metalwork, carpentry and joinery. And then if I can just illustrate a point where we've got materials on site, but there was no work done. If we look at paint work, there is paint on site in the store to the value of 4,000 Rand. But if you look at the list of work done, there was no paint work done yet. But we have to, in other words, the work done for paint work is 0 plus materials on site of 4,000 Rand. In other words, you have to pay the contractor escalation on the 4,000 Rand worth of paint on site. Perhaps maybe next month, when we're going to prepare certificate number 6, we might have a value here for paint work 152. There was some work done related to paint work. Good. So in this case, all the values are given. And then also note that the previous accumulative totals for escalation up to and including certificate number 4 for the main contract is 4,583, and then for the electrical contractor 700 Rand. That is accumulative totals. Remember, our approach is that we work with accumulative and then we deduct what we've certified before. Good. So let us go to the actual calculation of the escalation. So the contract and the contractor are still the same. Let's hope that's the same contractor that we've started with. The question here is the adjustment for certificate number 5, the escalation certificate. And remember, people, that escalation certificate, although we treat this now as a separate calculation, the escalation certificate will always be part and parcel of a payment certificate. So it's almost like a supplementary calculation based on the values for the payment certificate. Good. And we all know by now the date for the certificate is the 28th of June. Obviously, in your principal agreement, you will find that it will be stipulated on which day you should actually prepare and submit a payment certificate. The tender date for the main contractor was the 14th of November 2017. So that will determine the IO indice, and then the completion date, which you will also find in the preliminaries section or in the contract data of the JBCZ principal agreement, that the date will be stipulated, in this case, the 30th of November 2018. That remains fixed right through from certificate 1 right up till the final certificate. Your tender date and the completion date will remain the same. The only variable will be the date of certificate, obviously, and also the extended date. That might change because the contractor might claim extension of time, and the principal agent will decide, well, I'm going to give you 6 or 10 days extra, and that will then be added to the original tender or completion date. Good. So let's look at the calculation or the actual template. The first column is your column for the various work groups. So each trade, in other words, earthworks, will have a work group number. I don't expect you now to know the actual numbers off by heart. It will be in the indices you'll see later on. The indices will provide you with the work group number. Obviously, the more you use the indices, you become familiar with the actual work group number. So let us look at the earthworks work group 104 and calculate the escalation on that specific trade. So if we look at the next columns, you'll see that the first column talks about to date. Now that is for work done and including materials on site up till to date. Less the previous totals, and that is now certificate number 5. So it's the total for certificate 5 less certificate 4 will give you the difference, which is the V value. So this is now the V value subject to escalation. So if we look at the exercise, workgroup 104, 37,000 Rand. That was for certificate 5. And then certificate 4, we had 33,000 Rand certified. So 37 less than 33 will give me a difference of 4,000. Now this 4,000 is now materials on site or work done, including materials on site. If you look at the schedule, there was no materials on site for earthworks. It was basically just all labor items. For instance, excavate for trenches, carting away, etc. It's all labor items, which is now subject to escalation, the full value of 4,000 Rand. Now let's apply the indices. It's very important now to identify and make sure that you understand the meaning of IO and IE and apply it correctly. Don't mix the two. IO is the base month, and that is based on the tender date, which is now the 14th of November. So the indices, the IO, we will apply November 2017. The IE is based on the date of certificate, and in this case, certificate 5 was dated on the 28th of June. So therefore, I'm going to use June 28. So let's go to the indices and look up for the workgroup 104, and I'm going to look at November 2017. So November 2017. For your workgroup 104, earthworks, November 2017, there you'll find 103.2, right? 103.2. If we look at the IE, which is now June 18 for workgroup 104, workgroup 104, June 18, 2018, we'll find it as 105.1. 105.1. So the indices will be provided by Stats South Africa. And if we apply the formula, remember the Haylett formula, 0.85, the constant, the factor. V is the amount subject to escalation, and that is the 4,000. Apply the indices IE divided by IO less 1, and then your answer should be 62 Rand and 60 cent for workgroup 104. Good. So it's a matter of just applying all the values. Let's look at workgroup 116, brickwork. The 122,000, remember it's now work done, materials on site. And just to repeat myself, if we go back to the schedule, your brickwork, the work done was 100,000 Rand plus materials on site, 100,000 Rand plus 15,000 plus 7,000 will give me my 122,000 Rand. You'll also find that paintwork, as we've said, there was no work done for paintwork, but we do have paint on site. So that's my 4,000 Rand. There was no values certified under certificate number 4. So that will give me then the V value of 4,000 Rand. And then preliminaries, workgroup 190. You'll note that I've just followed the order of the workgroup. I don't mind if you start with bill number 1, start with 190, and then work through all the trades. So that is basically the first part of this calculation, is the escalation for your main contractor. Also note the non-adjustables, the 1,800, and that is your profit and attendance. If we look at the schedule again, 1,500 plus the 300 Rand will give you your 1,800. In other words, for the certificate 5, the contractor will receive 152,600, but only 152,000 Rand will be subject to escalation. There is no escalation on the 600 Rand, which is the non-adjustable items. Remember, the three basic items is profit and attendance, as well as day works. So this is my main contractor. We add up all the values, that will give me 1,876 for this month. In other words, certificate 5 for the 5th month. We add the previous totals for certificate 1 to 4, so that the accumulative escalation up to and including certificate 5 gives me a value of 6,459.75. We also do the same calculation for all the nominated subcontractors, and remember, in this case we've only got one nominated subcontractor, but we could have, let's say, mechanical as well. We separate the nominated subcontractors. We could have air conditioning, we could have ventilation, etc., separate. Now the difference here is that the tender for the electrical installation was submitted on the 2nd of November, so therefore the IO for the electrical will be December 2017. Don't use the November 2017 for the main contract. It's now December 2017 because the tender for electrical was submitted on the 2nd of December. So if you go to the indices for December 2017 for electrical installation, December 2017, 115.2. 115.2. The IE remains the same because that is for certificate number 5. You'll also note that in this case, there's a negative. I will talk about that, the negative figures. And then plus the previous escalation that was certified up till certificate number 4 was 700 Rand, that was given. And then if we add the two together, the accumulative totals for escalation based on the electrical installation is 168.75. Now let us look at the negative values. Obviously, we are still okay with the totals. They are all in the positive. But you'll find, let's say, for argument's sake, a negative figure. There could be two reasons for that. The first reason, and in this case, if you look at the difference between the indices, your base month versus the actual month of certificate, the IE. Under normal circumstances, the IE should be more than the IO. If you look at work group 104, 103.2, it increases to 105. 106 increases to 116. That is escalation. There should be an upclimb. There should be an increase. But in this case, you'll see that the indice has come down from 102.7 to 100.3. So therefore, that gives me a negative figure of 832 Rand. And under normal circumstances, as a PQS, I will accept that we've got an argument here that it's not our fault as a QS. It is the indices that has come down. It could happen that the previous indices was estimated indices, and they've got realistic data, and they've adjusted the indice now. Therefore, it has come down. So that is a reasonable, or actually an acceptable excuse, if I can call it that. If we look at the following, I'm going to use work group 150, 126. Let's say, for argument's sake, we've got a value of 45 in this case, 45,000, but your previous total certificate 5 was 50,000 Rand. Now let us see what happened here. So that also gives you now a negative figure. Let's look at the two variables, the indices. 103, it goes up, so it's norm, that is accepted. But the problem is here. it means that you've over-certified in the previous round, which is very, very dangerous. We might argue and say, well, in this case, we only in June, I still got a couple of months to rectify that problem. Okay, the closer you've got to the completion date, it's very risky for these negative figures. We don't want a negative figure at the end of the day. So as a quantity surveyor, please make sure that your valuation is in order. Don't just allow something or thumb suck anything. It should be a reasonable, acceptable valuation, right? We don't want this. We don't want surprises to your client. Good. This is basically the calculation of escalation to your certificate 5. And as I said, the calculation for escalation in this case, in this exercise, is can be seen as a separate calculation for now, but in future we will incorporate the escalation calculations with a payment certificate. And remember, we've talked about a fixed contract versus a contract subject to escalation. So obviously in this case, the contract was subject to escalation, and then we apply the Haylett formula. Good. I'm sure that you've learned a lot today, and we will continue next time, and keep safe until we meet again.